Welcome to episode 6 of the Dream Freaks podcast, Death. It is called the Great Unknown, the Great Mystery. For thousands of years, we humans have tried to define it, cheat it, and at times control it. Yet death, in many ways, isn't a mystery at all. Death is actually quite simple. It's all around us every day. We witness it in many different ways. We experience it in biological terms when the body ceases to sustain life. We witness it when the season turns to autumn and leaves fall from the trees. We experience it metaphorically when relationships end. We can also experience the death of our ego. From day to day, we encounter many little deaths. From losing our wallet, getting fired from our job, to moving apartments. All of these occurrences all have a common thread that runs through it: endings. For the most part, we can feel uncomfortable with endings. It brings about feelings of sadness, sorrow, and grief. Often we want to avoid such emotions, so we find it easier to ignore the concept of endings and just sweep it all under the carpet. But the great equalizer calls for our attention. Death wants to teach us. It wants to share with us its transformative qualities, the lessons of impermanence and the power of now. Much like dreaming, death is a liminal, transitory space. We can work with death much like we do with dreams, in a conscious and reflective way. This can help us live more meaningful and connective lives. Welcome, dreamers, to the land of the dead, where we will be discussing death and dreams and how making death your friend can transform your life.
I'm Alejandro Salinas. I'm a massage therapist, yoga teacher, and dream guide here in Chicago.
Hi, I'm Carr. I'm a dreaming guide, a death doula, an author, and a tarot reader in London.
And I am Jenniffer ClarOscura, a dream.
Today we're talking about death, being the Halloween season. And Tree, you work pretty closely with death in your daily life, don't you?
Yeah, as a death doula. So a doula is also there at the beginning of life. So there's birth doulas. The word doula is actually a Greek word. It means a woman who serves. So other words for a death doula would be death midwife. And sometimes we use the word end of life guide. So it's, basically walking through the journey home through the dying process. And that's kind of what I do with various clients and people. So it's, psychological help and emotional help, existential, spiritual help, and like practical stuff too, like how to organize your own funeral and memorial and, filling out death certificates and all the practical stuff too that comes after death, which helps the family out quite a bit. But death's always been kind of on the radar. And I guess with this, the season of Halloween and the Day of the Dead coming up, it seems to be a time of the year in which a lot of cultures around the world reflect upon death and dying. It becomes kind of a apparent theme, so to speak. And you work with death too, though, Ale, don't you?
To a lesser degree, yeah. I host death cafes here in Chicago. And those started actually over in London by John Underwood And I think about 2010, he was like, "Hey, let's just get some people together. Let's have some cake and coffee and talk about death and dying, just to be comfortable with talking about death and dying, because talking about it can be really hard for some people,
Yeah.
um, or scary, and it's often avoided. And just having those
Yeah.
conversations, I've done a couple, and just they're some of the most magical times, and people really leave uplifted and revitalized and excited for life, excited for death and for funerals. And there's definitely a lot of healing that happens. Some people share some things that are difficult. All truths are welcome. You don't necessarily need to be the most death positive, or it doesn't matter what kind of religious beliefs you hold. We're there
Mhm.
to hold space. And people come in with fears, leave saying that they're less afraid, or that it really helped them heal.
It's so good to
Nice.
be able to just speak about death. It's
Yeah.
almost a relief for some people. Initially, you get over a few of the fear and awkwardness, but the Death Cafe movement's amazing. What a great movement for death positivity.
Mm-hmm.
And over here in Europe, I've engaged in the Death Cafe thing as well. And same, Ale, like you get a lot of the same responses, and it's very moving as well. And they're very safe spaces in which to voice your feelings and ideas about death. I mean, some people are sharing just the death of their cat, whereas other people share, more complex interpersonal relationships of losing somebody close to them. But they're very transformative, and it's great that this sort of thing is popping up all over the world now. Um, it's just very human, isn't it? It's just like a human thing to acknowledge and talk about is death. We all are going to die. It's part of the process of being a human being and being on this planet. Um, so yeah, really important to acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm.
And Jenny,
And yeah,
Yes.
Jenny,
yeah,
I'm
and Jenny,
here.
how is death popped up in your life in ways? I know with the dream you work with that you do, and also your hypnosis work. I'm sure this has come up on your radar. And what do you think?
Yeah, death for me mostly happens within dreams. I have communication with family members from the afterlife, and I'm able to access them, and they're able to access me through not just dreams, but astral travels and in between life realms. I was given the choice a long time ago to open up my medium ship abilities, but the problem with that was that I didn't want the afterlife to have contact with me all the time while I'm awake, because I grew up with a sister that sees dead people. And I saw how it scared, the crap out of her. So I am very comfortable with the afterlife contact to be within other realms. I prefer it that way. um, but yeah, death tree has helped me change my views and on death and in the physical plane, like when you see someone dying or the suffering. And I went through a rather traumatic experience watching a loved one suffer and then die, a quick death, like over in the time span of 1 year, watching a person suffer, and not just physically, but their ego, and it was traumatizing. So I didn't want to talk about death too much, but when I met Tree, she was all up in the death doula school, and she kept talking about it, and I was like, okay, this is a sign that I have to, um, that I really have to bring that in and deal with it and heal. And I had a dream, actually. In the dream, I'm dying at peace. I'm laying down, and I wonder if my 3-year-old son, who is now 5.5 actually, but in the dream and back then he was 3, I was wondering if he would remember me, but I sensed he would be okay and healthy. And I hugged my husband from the back and until it was time, and there was a lady guide there, like a death doula guide, and she kept changing personas, like it was like one person then another. I realize I'm ready to go and that I'm totally happy because I did everything I wanted to up to that point. I was very happy with my life and the life I'd had, and I knew the time was upon me, and I laid on my back, and then I felt death like a warm, undulating vibration that embraced my whole head and face. It felt friendly and pretty pretty good, like wonderful. And I said the word blue, which is my guide. And as I prepared for the meeting, I woke up at that point and realized I was having astral vibrations. And I exited into the astral plane. But yeah, it's been great. You know, both of you talk about death all the time, and it's gotten me used to the topic, and not just in dream, but you know, in our daily life, and in a positive way. And I'm still learning. I'm still in the process of accepting it in that way where I embrace it like that. So I can't say that I'm on the other side of that yet, but you know, it's a work in progress. I'm not sure quite why in dreams it's more comfortable for me, you know. It's just one of those things, but yeah.
Well, probably jumping off from what Jenny said, um, Tree, you have a decent amount of psychopompic.
Oh, the psychopomp work. They are the role a psychopomp has is basically helping and ushering the souls of the dead to the other side. And this can be done in your waking states, just through intuition and kind of open to the other side, into the realms, and intuitively knowing that there is someone there that needs to be ushered or helped or escorted to and greeted and brought back together with the ancestors. So this can be done in the waking state, but it can be done in the dream state too. So I've done this in astral and also in dreams as well, where I've set intents to
Mm.
help someone who's passed away, but they've not properly transitioned. I
Mm-hmm.
guess
Mm.
that's the word you
Yeah.
would say. This is something that I've done intuitively for a really long time, but it's something that I've experienced, and I've seen transformative results with family members and people of loved ones. And usually, my services are called upon when family members or friends can really feel a person still around in some kind of way, a bit troubling, let's just say,
Like
Yeah.
a
a troubling
haunting.
sort of, yeah, a little bit like that. But not, we're not talking like horror film stuff here, but it's just, there's an uneasiness about it. What I've noticed with psychopomp work, and what I've noticed with people who've died and need this sort of guidance when they've passed,
Totally.
they usually have died very abruptly. They've usually got killed basically, and don't really know that they've died. Um,
Mm.
Sometimes it's people who've died under the influence of drugs and alcohol, so inebriated, so a lot of overdoses, and sometimes suicides as well. This seems to be the kind of theme and the tone that sets the stage for um, someone who hasn't quite transisted smoothly, because they, in fact, don't really understand that they've died. So this seems to cause a little bit of activity around friends and family members, where their presence is often felt, or there's some distressing dreams or distressing experiences in around uh, their day-to-day life at home, or just energy, just feeling it.
Yeah, and like Tree, I also have experienced helping souls cross over. I guess that's the word. A lot of people don't know, it's true, that they are dead, and they get stuck in the astral plane. So at a very young age, my spirit guides taught me how to um, clear a space. Uh, and it's something that I don't I don't even know if it was taught to me, or because some of the teachings are almost telepathic or energy transference. And I remember transferring like energy, like knowledge through energy. It's a different way of teaching, but it's almost like a knowing. And I just know how to do these things almost naturally. And I don't think about it twice. It's almost like I'm in my body. And the only time I can get out, like at will, in a way where I just step out of my body, is when I know there's soul and spirit in there. And that's what happens. Either they wake me up or I just get up out of my body and uh, proceed to cross them over. And usually that's also through some kind of a telepathic communication. It's almost like my presence makes them understand what happened. And some of them are shocked, angry, but then eventually they start to glow, eyes wide open, and poof, they're gone. So, but I also have done this in waking reality, where I use the energy of Archangel Michael and um, uh, also the help of my spirit guides. I summon the help of my spirit guides, sometimes my grandmothers, depending if it's a family, and make sure that that soul finds guidance and is clear to go, to move on, or if they need to finalize some things, it's up to them, right? But yeah, that's the psycho pump, I guess. I've never used that word for this, so
Yeah, so it's a very understudied topic, I think, the role of a psychopomp, and it's not really talked about because obviously it doesn't really go with our construct of science right now and how we view how we view consciousness works
yeah,
and how
true.
we view life beyond the grave. But I
How does
find it
that
amazing work, and I'm always constantly blown away by it.
how does that process work? Do you incubate that dream to like reach out and find this person in like the astral realm, or do they like visit you, or do you encounter them like kind of haphazardly, or what?
Yeah, so I'll give a really good example of how I've worked in dreams with psychopomp work. I got a phone call from a guy who came to one of my workshops, and he had recently moved to New York City, and he was in his new apartment. And he got in touch, and I only met him once because I did a workshop with him. But he got in touch because he said, I don't know who else to talk to because this is some weird shit's going on. And I said, okay, yeah, what's going on? He moved into a new apartment, and um, several nights in a row, 3 nights in a row, he was waking up in the dead of night with the presence of this woman in the room with him. And he was experiencing like sleep paralysis and dream states that he had never experienced before. And he was seeing her and feeling the energy in the room, and it was really distressing for him. And he was feeling like I very afraid of going back to sleep at night, and he wanted to know, do you think you can help even from afar? And I assured him that yeah, I would do my best to help. So basically I gave him a little advice of how to sort of claim the space and clear the energy in his flat, but that I would also be simultaneously setting an intent that evening to connect with the situation and with this woman and just see what was up and if I could help. So I set an intent and I went into sleep, and I was, in the hypnagogic, and then I was holding the intent, and then I slipped into sleep. But that first bit of sleep where it's just there's nothing, you haven't started dreaming yet.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden, in that stage of sleep, out of nowhere, I see this woman's face comes rushing out of the darkness straight into mine, like, and making pig sounds, like going like, like right into my face, and it startled me awake.
Oh my
Whoa.
I,
god.
I, I just went, oh, awake. And it woke up my partner, and he said, are you okay? Are you all right? And I just started laughing, and I was just like, yeah, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I was laughing, and I was just thinking to myself, okay, you got my attention now, lady. Here we go. All right. So she made contact. So then I set another tent. Okay. This is a thing with working in this kind of realm. It does sound kind of scary, right? But it's not. They're kind of like it's almost like they scare you in order just to get your attention, just to go, hey. It's like their only way of, not only way of doing it, but that's how I take it. I take it
Right.
as like, okay, they got my attention.
Like no different than
And
the nightmares
yeah,
call for
it's
your
just a
attention.
prompt. Calls for your attention. It's like, okay. And you move beyond the fear and you just see it as, okay, you got my attention and here we are. So I set another intent. Okay, we've made a connection. So I'm here to help. So I went back into sleep, and went into the dreams. And in the dream, there was a telephone ringing, like a vintage telephone. And I answered the phone, and she was on the other end. So this woman was on the other end. And I started having a conversation with her, and she was totally drunk and really confused and crying and really upset. And
Whoa.
um, she wanted to go home, and there was all of this conversation about confusion and not knowing what was going on. And I was talking to her in a very calm way, much like I do in my death doula work. And I was just kind of holding the space for her and just telling her it's okay, it's all right, you can go home now. And then her voice turned into that of a little girl, and I said, yeah, that's okay, you can go home now and go see your mom. And it turned into that, and she said thank you and goodbye. And that was, the dream and the experience. I woke up the next day and my partner was like, you were sleep talking a lot last night. And I was like, okay, that's really interesting. And then I got in touch. Me and the guy from New York got in touch, and he said nothing happened last night. I didn't feel any hauntings or anything distressing. And I told him my experience, and he just said, you know what? This whole experience has completely turned around how I see all of this stuff. This has been an eye-opening situation, and wow, I'm forever changed by this experience. And then he didn't get any more visitations after that. So that's an
Wow.
example of like psychopomp work done in like the dream states. But yeah, intent, it can go a long way,
Mm-hmm.
It really can. It can go a long way when you just, tune in and set your mind to wanting to help. Um, and then obviously not being afraid. Like, you have to move beyond a lot of fear when you're working with this sort of stuff, because, like we've all seen the horror films, and there's a lot of that can freak us out. But you just, that you just stand on your own power, and it's just people like you and me, and they're just reaching out in various ways to get your attention.
Yeah, and that reminds me, that makes sense that, if someone, say,
Yeah.
died, overdosed, intoxicated, that their consciousness would still be in that state of mind,
Totally.
because that's, in the Tibetan dream yoga, that's how I got into death, because I was into lucid dreams. And then I discovered the Tibetan Buddhist dream yoga practices and how rooted those are with death and dying, that the lucid dreaming is a direct preparation for death and dying.
Mm.
And that, we want to prepare this sleep hygiene. We want to prepare our minds before we go to bed, and that we carry that mind state into our dreams. It makes sense that we would carry the same kind of similar consciousness from waking to dying to death,
Mm-hmm.
as we do from waking to sleep to dreams.
For sure, there's a
Yes.
connection. Mm-hmm.
Very powerful. And there's ways in which you can play with the concept of death right on the edge of sleep as well. In the hypnagogic state. So that's when our brain waves are slowing down and moving into the slower theta waves. And what happens in that liminal realm is when you start playing with the concept of death, and you just imagine like, okay, now I'm dying, and just sit with it and feel it. I know it sounds morbid, like, oh, I'm dying, but it's not. See it more as an experiment. I'm dying now. How does that feel? How does it feel to surrender to the sensation of letting go, of surrender, of death? It's also a really great way to play along with the out of body experience as well. So anything out of body, preparing yourself for death using the OBE experience. So again, when you're falling into sleep and you're letting your body go into complete relaxation, so it's sleeping body, awake mind, and you feel the high vibrations start moving through your body. It's like an energetic wave that is like the onset before you can detach from your body. Using that state too to sort of overcome fear of death and feel comfortable with the concept of death. They're really great ways in which you can prepare yourself psychologically and also prepare your consciousness for something expansive and beyond. They're really helpful with these sort of death practices.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Buddhists spend a lot of time talking, thinking, contemplating about death and dying. One of my friends went out to a monastery where the head abbot recently passed. And for weeks, they would just meditate over her dead body.
Whoa.
Her dead body was there out on display. But it was a very death-heavy, contemplative monastery to begin with. And are you familiar with Ernest Becker?
No.
No, I'm not. So
He's
who's he?
done a lot of work with death and dying. I mean, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross developed like the 5 stages of grief. Ernest Becker was along the same lines. Ernest Becker was an American anthropologist. He wrote The Denial of Death, a really innovative work on death and dying. He developed something we call terror management theory. And that's basically all about how we manage our fear of death by creating meaning systems.
Oh, wow.
And that system can be usually within a group. Religions are a perfect example. You find meaning after death through your faith. You can also find meaning even through like a sports team, or you're just your family, whatever it is. And when those belief systems are threatened, we have this either like convert or destroy reaction. And later research, I think a college in maybe Arizona, I can't remember exactly right off the top of my head right now, did some studies on judges and mentioning death to them. So the judges, their meaning system being the law of the land that they're in. And at the most common case these judges were seeing were like prostitution cases. And so when they made the judges think about their death, they ended up setting the bail, basically the punishment, much higher than when they weren't made to think about their death. Conversely, they were more benevolent to people who did show, who weren't as threatening to their meaning systems. And the more they contemplated, so like this initial, like just reminder, this brief reminder of death had an aversive reaction. But the more that we think about death and dying, the more peace we tend to get then.
Makes sense.
And so, right, people get more homophobic, racist, nationalistic. They fall into clear-cut gender norms when confronted with death because these are all meaning systems that we try to hold and keep sacred.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
And so, we have like politicians using our fear against us. And some of the best things we can do for ourselves, for other people, is to deeply contemplate death.
Mm-hmm.
And even in yoga, the last pose we do is shavasana, which
Yes.
is corpse pose,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which when practiced is a practice of letting go
Yeah.
instead of holding on to. And that initial reminder of death is this tendency to hold on, to grip onto who we think we are, to hold to what we find sacred and valuable.
Mm-hmm.
But the more we contemplate, the more we can let go, the more peace we have. And my friend said that we forget that we put the exact definition of enlightenment on graves, which is to rest in peace.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, death is
And that,
it's so humbling, isn't it? It's so humbling, and it's the great equalizer. And if one thing that I've observed in helping people end of life as the biggest thing that is the most challenging thing for those to navigate, who are dying, it's not so much the physical stuff. Sure, there's a physical stuff that is, that can be very daunting and very painful, but it's the death of the ego. It's the death of the ego, and who was I, and what is my identity, and who am I going to be? And I was a lawyer, or I was a doctor, or a politician, and now I'm dying. And what does that even mean now? And what was that all about? And people really lose their sense of identity when they get closer to death. The boundaries start dissolving, and they start grasping at the sense of self, and grasping at to hold on to the egoic identity of themselves. And it can be very, very painful. It can be very painful to find yourself dissolving. Yeah, ego death. It's
well,
probably one of the more painful things to experience through the dying process, the loss of identity and self. Um, that's why if you live your life in a way where you're consciously always interacting with, the concept of yourself beyond an ego, this can help a lot when you're kind of moving towards death. Also, just keeping your house in order. A lot of times near end of life, all that repressed stuff that's been squished down, and all the resentments or bitterness or wounds, they all pop up at the end of life, and all of a sudden you're navigating a sea of emotions and pain and wounds from sometimes like 40, 50, 60 years prior. When you consciously live your life, and you transcend these things, and you let them go, and you do the work on yourself, I really believe it makes it a lot easier at end of life to transist, to let go. I call it a conscious dreaming practice. I mean, I reflect on death every single day, not in a morbid way, but in a way that helps me live better.
mm-hmm.
You seize the day, you see the beauty in every single moment, and you
Right.
catch yourself when you're falling out of out of your awareness, and unconsciously acting and behavior and patterns. So yeah, conscious death practice, it's a really healthy thing to interject in your day. I know, Jenny, you work with death, and you were saying that you work quite a bit with the god Anubis.
Well, for me, the way that I work with death is not even what I consider death. It's so strange. It's more like the in between lives realms. I came into this life with a bit of past life memories, and uh, I've had my first experience that initiated me into astral travel, and all of those things happened in a near death experience. So it wasn't, it was a different entry into the topic. I never really associated it with how a person dies in this planet. It was always separate for me for some reason. So with you guys, I guess I started to integrate the two sides, you know. But I did. I had a new Anubis came to me in a dream where my husband and I. It was the future, but somehow in the future we looked like we were 20 and we were jumping for joy, like celebrating as if you were winning a race or crossing a finish line, like a big victory. And when we opened the door, or the door was open to us, it was Anubis was there, and he was letting us in, you know, to whatever that was, and we were just high fiving, jumping for ultimate joy and ecstasy. Um, which happened at the end of a lot of shadow work I was doing, so I feel like that was symbolic. But back in ancient times, there were some people considered Hermes and Anubis to be in ancient Greece to be related somehow, mixed. They even had one moment when they were calling her Manibus or something. So I almost feel I do work with Hermes a lot. That's who I work with a lot. I have a lot of connection with these in between lives realms, and my sons have come to me in those realms before being born, and while I was pregnant, and I've seen how I chose this life in a way, and how my husband followed me into this life. In that sense, I'm connected to whatever is out beyond. Uh, but yeah, once again, bridging that with the actual human death is very strange to me.
So, after death visitation dreams, we want to talk a bit about that. These are the dreams that you have when a deceased person, it could be a loved one or even a friend or acquaintance, comes and visits you in the dream. And the dream holds a very specific quality to it. So it doesn't seem like all your other kind of normal standard dreams. The dream has a very vivid quality to it. There's often an energy to it that's different. And the person who's visiting you is usually a younger, more healthy version of themselves. And communication within the dream is very specific. It's almost more telepathic than it is, physical. And often there's a message from the deceased person, usually one of encouragement, like I'm here, I love you, or I'm always watching over you, or give a message to Auntie May, she forgot to cut the grass, or there's usually something there that is a communicated message. And these dreams can often bring a lot of peace and calm and help people who are bereaved and experiencing loss. And I know I've experienced these after death visitation dreams several times with family members and friends. Have you had anything like that, Ale?
I have a brother. My oldest brother passed away when he was 7 years old, and I never knew him.
Mm.
So I kind of grew up with this sort of ghost brother,
Yeah.
and I've tried reaching him. Not quite to much avail. On a couple of occasions. One time was on a retreat, and I ended up in this like floating mausoleum sky tower thing. And another time I was in this like 70s style basement full of kids' toys. And I felt like he was just around the corner, about to walk out, but never quite did.
Mm.
So as far as the dream work goes, not quite a whole lot. I've never had someone like super, super close to me pass.
Yeah.
Um, I have had a lot of family, but more distant um, than anyone who's like super strong emotional connections.
Mm.
But I do go visit his grave a lot. Actually,
Yeah.
he's buried here in Chicago. And that's been really nice. That's
Yeah,
been nice to have that sort of connection. And I built a dream catcher from like twigs and feathers that I found at the grave.
it's beautiful, a beautiful way to honor him.
Yeah.
And also this time of year, it's a beautiful time of year to honor those who have passed. And I know
Hmm.
in your tradition too, Ale, it seems as though there's more positivity in the Mexican traditions when it comes to honoring ancestors and death and dying, and around the Dias de Muerte and the Day of the Dead.
Yeah, Dia de los Muertos. My family actually never really celebrated that. Uh, my parents, my mom especially, is super Roman Catholic.
Mm.
And I think that kind of shies away from the more, traditional practices of Day of the Dead. But it's still something, like I knew about growing up, um, and very much love it. And we all went to go see that Coco,
Yeah,
that Pixar movie.
yeah,
I saw that with my family, and that was a really beautiful representation of the culture of the towns, of the music, of this like sense of family. And I can't watch that movie without shedding a couple of tears.
yeah.
I
That's-
recommend everyone go watch it.
yeah, that's great.
It's really beautiful.
That's good. And Jenny, with the after death visitation dreams, I know that you've experienced quite a few. If you wanted to share one with us.
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Alec, for sharing that story about your brother. Um, I think that when I had my first conscious visit from a person that has passed away, it happened during a hard time in my life. I was suffering a lot emotionally, and suddenly my dream got interrupted, and it just like fell like whoop, like confetti to the floor. And what was there instead was the door of my grandmother's house. I was standing there, and just boom, as soon as the confetti came down, it was like awareness came up. Just went hand in hand. Like it was given to me, awareness for this journey. And I opened the door. I knocked on the door, and she opened the door, my grandmother, but she looked like she was 18. And she was wearing a light blue gown, silky, veily. It was beautiful. And she had a crown or something. And in the middle of her living room was a crystal throne, luminous crystal throne, the way you would imagine a crystal throne, like clear crystal, diamond like, glittery. And she sat down, and I threw myself on her lap, like my head on her lap, to the floor, on my knees with my head on her lap. And I cried, I sobbed. And she said I could ask her 3 questions, and I did. She said I would not remember the third question's answer. And the questions that I asked her, they all came true, but the third question, which was the one that I really wanted to know, I wasn't going to know. But now I know what it is because it happened already, and I know why I couldn't know, because it would alter my future here in the United States. I wouldn't have come, and I needed to come. I have my kids here, they wanted to be born. So, yeah, that was my first real conscious afterlife visitation. After that, it kept happening with with other. I got to say goodbye to my grandfather. That he died while I was having exams, so I never got to say goodbye. And nobody wanted to tell me until my exams were over because they were afraid that I would start grieving and fail. I don't know. So I found out abruptly from a neighbor, which was worse. And for a year, I had this guilt that I didn't go see him that weekend, but because I was studying. But in a dream, I was same thing. The dream ended, it like fell to the ground, so to speak, or wiped away. And I was in my grandmother's house, and he was in a bed. It was understood that he was in a bed in his room, dying. And I was very conscious. I said, okay, this is my opportunity to say goodbye in a dream, have a healing dream. So I went in and I put my hand, it was like he had already passed or something. And I put my hand on him and I said goodbye. And at that point, he just grabbed my hand like he used to. Like he had this strong grasp. He would pinch and make it hurt a little, you know? It was just this way, very like tough, rough, but in a loving way. It was just his thing to make us go like, you know? And he did that. And at that point, I was totally startled into awareness that he was there to say goodbye to me, like for real. And it was great. I got to hug him, sob a little, laugh a little, and I woke up, you know, healed in that sense. So, and like this, I've had so many from my family that come to me, and I feel like it's a connection I'm glad I share with them because I've got to grieve in my own way through my dreams, and they also come and they tell me things that's going on in reality, the present. And my sister, who has mediumship abilities, confirms, like we both have similar dreams, or she tells me that that is really happening there, and it's like there's no way I could know. So yeah, that's my connection with dreams.
Right.
So they can be super healing and personal. Your own practice with it can start in dreams. If you're comfortable with dreams like myself, you can get guidance on how to open up to this topic, and also reach out to, you know, Tree and Alejandro, who have very unique and death positive views. If you want to explore that more, I think Tree also has a Death Doula Instagram account at Death Doula Tree. And I think this would be a perfect moment to transition into a tarot card by our Death Doula Tree.
Yeah, with the tarot card. So I thought, what a great opportunity to talk about the death card in the tarot. And the death card is kind of like the most feared card in the tarot deck. I know that when I've read tarot for people and they've pulled the death card, their faces turn white and they get really nervous and they break out in a sweat. You know, so there's a lot of superstition around death. It's almost as though even just saying the word death, it's gonna become contagious or something, and that you're gonna die. With the death card, there's so much more to it than a fear factor. It's actually a very transformative, very powerful card. It's all about transition, transformation, endings, and change. And these are very important qualities as we journey through our lives. This is the catalyst in which brings new things into our realms and expands our consciousness. We need change. Change is fundamental, and change is actually the only constant in this universe. Because it's such a misunderstood card, I love to really unpack it because I think it gets such a bad reputation as being really scary. There's so much about the card too that is cleansing and very positive. So pulling this card in a tarot, it could be huge messages for you to shed something in your life that is just no longer working. And it could be, you know, a relationship, a way of thinking. It could be a job. It could be, you know, your life philosophy. it's a very cleansing card in which where you can move into something that you're meant to be moving into and shedding away something that just absolutely doesn't serve you anymore. It's also an open door into a broader and more satisfying experience of life. Sometimes the death card can bring up elements of very sudden and unexpected changes. Much like death, sometimes it can come sudden and abruptly and can be quite a shock to the system. This can have a very enlightening aspect to it, just like death kind of does. Sometimes I know I've experienced sudden deaths of friends, and the actual process of their sudden death has caused a quickening within myself and my consciousness to kind of go up a level in a way of connection to myself and to the universe. So it can have a very enlightening effect when the death card is pulled and reflected upon as well. So yeah, that's death. In a nutshell, a very positive, powerful, and transformative card.
Mm-hmm. Endings.
Yes. And with endings,
New
new beginnings.
Absolutely. Yeah, you need to, it's like clearing out your house. You gotta like get rid of some stuff so you can let new stuff in.
Yeah, you got to get all those like creaky skeletons out of the closet. Get it out, shake off the dusty bones.
Some fall clinging.
Yeah, get the rakes out. Start raking the
Clear the
leaves.
spider webs.
Yeah, clear the spider webs. Although I'm going to be putting some up, hey, because it's Halloween.
Yeah. So I'm actually a little sad. I'm going to be on retreat. That's why we're recording this episode.
Yeah.
A little earlier than we would. I'm going to be out in Sedona with Andrew Holacek and Stephen LaBerge and Kristen Lamarca, who've all got books out on dreaming. And I'm super excited. And if I can get some field reports, that'd be great.
Yes, we look forward to that, Ale, and hearing about all your adventures in dreaming. Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Dream Freaks. If you haven't already, please subscribe and like us wherever you're listening to your podcast on Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, Google Play. We have yet to quite bridge Apple, but we'll be up there soon enough. You can support us on Patreon by becoming a member there as little as $1 and enjoying some benefits, some private group chats, Q&As. We have merch for availability, private conversations with the Dream Freaks. If you enjoyed the episode, please share on Instagram, on Facebook, tell a friend, tag us, put us in a post. Feel free to share your own experiences with dreams and death. We love to hear what you all have to say. And that's all we have for now. Wherever you may be, may you have sweet dreams and stay lucid.